The lanterns that burn forever in Duskfield Hollow. The first time I heard about Duskfield Hollow, it was spoken in the kind of hushed tone people use when they're not sure whether they're telling you a ghost story or a warning. The hollow isn't on most maps anymore. It was a village tucked deep in the folds of the Appalachian Mountains, where coal smoke once hung heavy and the air reeked of burning pitch. My grandfather used to mutter about it when he thought I wasn't listening. He was a truck driver, the kind who knew every back road from West Virginia to Kentucky, and he swore he once passed through Duskfield Hollow by mistake. He never went back. The lanterns, he would say, trailing off, eyes unfocused. The lanterns still walk there. I thought it was just a story to keep me from wandering too far into the mountains at night. But years later, curiosity won. I found myself chasing legends down the rusted veins of old coal towns. And eventually, the road led me to Duskfield Hollow. The asphalt cracked beneath my tires as the road narrowed, twisting between ridges that blotted out the sky. My GPS had already given up, blinking aimlessly, leaving me with nothing but instinct and the faint memory of directions scrawled on a napkin by a diner waitress who whispered, "Don't stay past sundown." When I crested the final hill, the village appeared below me like a wound in the trees. The houses leaned and sagged, roofs half collapsed, glassless windows staring like blind eyes. The streets were empty, and yet not. Even in the fading daylight, I thought I saw faint glimmers like sparks moving slowly among the ruins. I told myself it was just reflections, tricks of the evening light. But in my chest, a heaviness grew, as though the air itself carried memory. I parked near what must have been the main square. A cracked fountain leaned sideways, choked by weeds. The silence pressed in, to complete, broken only by the groan of cicadas winding down for the night. In one of the houses, its door hanging crooked from a single hinge, I found what I had half expected. Scorch marks up the walls, blackened beams, and the stink of long-burned wood that somehow lingered even after decades. That's when the story came back to me, the one my grandfather never finished. In 1911, a fire tore through Duskfield Hollow. They said it began in the mine, sparked by methane, and spread quickly, consuming both coal shafts and homes. Some claimed the fire was an accident. Others whispered the miners had been cheating death for too long, digging too deep where they shouldn't have, and that something old had struck back. Whole families were caught in their beds. Men tried to run through the streets with lanterns in hand, searching for wives and children, but the fire ate faster than feet could flee. When it was over, the hollow was a cemetery without graves. No one rebuilt. Yet the lanterns, they said, never went out. As dusk surrendered to night, I should have left. My truck waited, engine still warm, but some pull deeper than reason kept me rooted. I wanted to know, needed to see what my grandfather had spoken of. It happened first at the end of the lane. A faint orange glow wavered in the mist, bobbing with the slow rhythm of footsteps. My heart lurched into my throat. It was unmistakable. A lantern, swaying gently as though carried by a hand. But there was no hand. The light floated, suspended in air, weaving between the rotting houses. With each swing, it lit fragments of the ruin. Peeling wallpaper, a broken chair, the outline of a child's toy, and then it stopped. The glow lingered, burning steady. I could swear it was looking at me. I stepped back instinctively, my boot crunching glass. The lantern flared brighter, sharper as though in response. Then another appeared, behind it, drifting out from the blackened husk of a home. Then another, and another. The street was filling with them. There must have been a dozen at first, then 2 dozen, their lights flickering with a strange rhythm, like breath. They moved in silent procession down the main road, past the fountain, past me. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, watching the impossible. And then I realized something else. Shadows moved around the lights knot, cast by them, but carried with them. Shapes, the faint outlines of figures, indistinct but human in height and form. Shoulders hunched, heads bowed, steps falling in perfect rhythm with the swing of the lanterns. Not alive, not gone. My throat went dry. I wanted to run, but every muscle locked. The nearest lantern passed within feet of me. For a moment, The glow painted its shadow clearer. The burned outline of a face, hollow sockets where eyes had been, lips frozen in a scream that made no sound. The stories had been wrong. The lanterns weren't just wandering lights. They were the villagers themselves, trapped forever in the fire that had devoured them. The procession did not end. More lanterns drifted out from alleys, from windows, from the ruined church at the edge of town. The glow turned the fog into a living thing, twisting, thickening until it smelled of smoke. My chest tightened. The air grew hotter, and then I heard it. Crackling. The sound of fire, faint at first, then rising, filling every corner of the hollow. Orange light deepened into a searing red. The houses seemed to ripple, their blackened beams glowing as if reignited. I staggered back, choking, certain the village was burning anew. But it wasn't. Not really. The fire wasn't of this world, was memory. Echo, curse, a fire that had never truly gone out. The lantern-bearers moved faster now, circling, their outlines sharper, their mouths open in silent, endless screams. The crackle grew deafening. Heat licked my skin, though there were no flames. My vision swam. I stumbled toward my truck, blind with panic, but the road twisted, shifting, the way cursed places always do. Every turn brought me back to the square, back to the fountain, back to the lanterns. Clara, it was then I saw her. Among the procession, one figure stood out, a woman. Her dress burned away 2 rags, her face pale as bone. But unlike the others, her mouth was closed, her eyes fixed on me with terrible clarity. She clutched her lantern high, and with her free hand, she reached not toward me through me. I felt it, like ice driven into my chest. A pull, a demand. She wanted something, my breath, my life, my place among them. For one impossible moment, I saw myself reflected in her hollow eyes, walking with them, a lantern in my hand, forever burning. I screamed and tore free, though my legs barely obeyed. Somehow, blindly, I found my truck again. The door slammed, the engine roared. Tires spun on gravel, and the village, the lanterns, the fire roll of it blurred into darkness behind me. I never spoke of Duskfield Hollow to my family. I never told them that the smell of smoke still wakes me at night, or that sometimes, driving lonely Appalachian back, I catch sight of a lantern's glow in my rearview mirror, bobbing steadily, following me mile after mile. I thought I escaped, but I was wrong. The lanterns don't just burn in Duskfield Hollow. They burn forever. And once you've seen them, they'll find you again. Because those villagers are still walking, still burning, still searching for someone to carry their light. And one day, I fear, they come for me. The children who never left Stillwater.
Help, please.
Come closer. Just a little further.
Stillwater is a name that barely exists anymore. Not on modern maps, not in official registries. If you asked around Louisiana today, maybe 1 in 100 would even know what you're talking about, and those who did would only lower their voice, eyes shifting as if the very syllables might summon something. Stillwater wasn't just a forgotten village swallowed by time. It was a place that was deliberately erased, because the people nearby knew that even if the houses had rotted and the church had caved in, something had remained, something you could still hear if you were foolish enough to go there. The children who never left. The history of Stillwater begins much like countless frontier settlements, built along the edge of the wetlands in the early 1800s. It was meant to be a lumber camp and trapping post, supplying the larger parishes nearby. Families followed soon after Stobon, Hopeful, and Dirt. They built a schoolhouse, a small wooden church, and homes that leaned against one another like drunks in the mud. But the swamp was always waiting. It gave them fish, yes, but it also gave fever, rot, and death. The ground was never dry, and the mosquitoes never slept. The first tragedy came in the spring of 1871. Rains fell without pause for nearly 2 weeks, and the Stillwater Creek rose past its banks. Entire fields drowned. Barns floated off their foundations, and on one black morning, The schoolhouse itself collapsed into the flood. It was filled with children at the time, 42 students and their teacher. The adults of the village waded through waist-high waters, clawing at the boards, screaming for the little ones trapped inside. But the current was merciless. They say the sound of tiny fists beating against the walls haunted those parents forever. By nightfall, the waters had carried away the school, the bodies, and the voices. But a week later, when the floods finally receded, the survivors claimed something impossible: children's voices. They carried over the still water at dusk, laughter, shouts, the patter of bare feet splashing in the shallows. Parents who had buried empty coffins stumbled into the swamp, calling out their children's names, convinced they were alive. Some swore they saw small shapes flitting through the mist, pale faces between the cypress trees, but none were ever recovered. The swamp had taken them, yet it had not silenced them. Over the following years, Stillwater withered. Plague took what the flood had spared. Families packed up and left, heading north, abandoning homes to the weeds. By the 1900s, Stillwater was a ghost town, and yet, travelers kept reporting the same thing. If you passed through the swamps at dusk, if the fog was thick enough, you'd hear them. The children, always laughing, always playing, just out of sight. And if you lingered too long, if you called out, they sometimes answered back. The strangest accounts came from hunters. One, a man named Charles Lemoyne, in 1912, wrote in his journal that he had stumbled across a group of children gathered on a half-sunken log. He swore they were pale, dripping wet, but smiling as though waiting for him. When he stepped closer, they slipped soundlessly into the water and disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only ripples. Lemoyne abandoned his hunt, never returning to Stillwater. By the 1950s, the legend had grown darker. Couples who parked along the swamp road after midnight reported hearing fingernails scratching across the metal of their cars, followed by the faint giggles of unseen children. Some swore that tiny handprints appeared fogged on their windows. Most terrifying of all were the disappearances. A handful of people campers, hikers, thrill-seekers ventured into Stillwater's ruins and never returned. Locals whispered that the children had taken them, jealous for company, desperate to drag the living back into the watery grave where they played forever. Folklorists call the Stillwater children a classic residual haunting, echoes trapped in place by violent death. But others suggest something worse, that these weren't echoes at all, that the swamp itself had claimed them. Recept Tim, and kept Tim, that the children had become something neither alive nor dead, luring the lonely and the curious deeper into the fog. Even today, if you drive through southern Louisiana, near the Ashafia Basin, some roads skirt land that was once part of Stillwater. On cold nights, with fog rolling low and the moon thin as a bone, you might feel a strange tug, the woods pressing in, the water whispering, and if you're unlucky, you'll hear it soft at first, then sharper. Children's laughter, a splash where no one stands, a small voice calling from the mist, using your name. And if you answer, if you dare step closer to the water's edge, you may see them, pale faces shining in the darkness, eyes wide, hair clinging wet against their cheeks, their lips curled into playful grins. But don't smile back. Don't move toward them, because those who do are never seen again. They say the swamp keeps its own, and Stillwater's children are patient. They have been waiting over 100 years, and they will wait 100 more. For you. For anyone foolish enough to believe that what calls from the fog is innocent. So if one night you find yourself lost near the water, and you hear a child's laughter rising from the mist, ask yourself, are you hearing the living, or the children who never left Stillwater?
Come! Help me down here! Daniel! Come back!
The Weeping Maiden of Hallowmere Village. Hallowmere Village was a kind of place you didn't find unless you were looking for a tour, unless it wanted you to, tucked into the folds of the Appalachian foothills. Its narrow roads curled like veins through dark pine forests and low, misty hollows. Even in daylight, the village seemed smothered by shadow, the kind of gray light that made you feel as though the sun was reluctant to shine there. Most maps didn't even mark it anymore. Ask a local, and you'd get one of two responses. Either a sharp warning not to go, or an uncomfortable silence. I'd first heard the name in a half-drunken story told at a gas station off Route 19. An old man, hands scarred from a lifetime of work, leaned in close, as though worried someone might overhear. He spoke of a woman, the weeping Maiden, a Jedder who wandered the fields and crossroads of Hallowmere, crying softly in the night. Sometimes she was seen standing on the old stone bridge that crossed the creek, her white dress soaked and heavy as though she had just emerged from the water. They said if you listened long, if you lingered when her sobs carried through the fog, you wouldn't leave Hallowmere the same. I should have dismissed it as folklore, and yet, weeks later, I found myself steering my truck down that lonely road, the forest pressing in close, my headlights slicing through mist that seemed thicker than it should have been. The village appeared suddenly, like it had been waiting. A crooked wooden sign announced Hallowmere. Est 1823. Though the paint was so faded it was barely legible. The houses were relics of another century, their clapboard siding warped, their porches sagging. A single church steeple jutted from the center of town, its bell long silent, its windows dark. There were no children playing, no traffic, no sound but the restless shuffle of leaves in the evening wind. I parked near the bridge, drawn by the sound of water rushing below. The stones were black with age, slick with moss. Standing there, I felt a peculiar weight pressing down, as though the air itself carried memory. The silence was not empty, it was watching. That's when I first heard it. Soft, broken sobbing carried on the wind. A woman's voice fragile, hollow, drenched in sorrow. My chest tightened. It seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once, threading through the trees, seeping into the ground beneath my feet. I told myself it was a trick of the water, the sound of the creek echoing in strange ways. But deep down, I already knew better. Later, after much asking around in nearby towns, I pieced together fragments of her story. No one agreed on the details, but the shape of it was always the same. In the mid-1800s, a young woman named Eliza lived in Hallowmere. She was betrothed to a coal miner, a man who worked in the shafts carved deep into the mountainside. On the eve of their wedding, tragedy struck. A collapse buried the mine and everyone inside. They said Eliza wandered the village in her bridal gown, searching for him, crying into the night. Some believed she threw herself into the creek out of despair. Others claimed the villagers turned on her, blaming her sorrow as a curse that had summoned misfortune. What everyone agreed on was this: the Lisa never left. Her spirit lingered, weeping at the bridge, by the churchyard, in the fields where the fog clung like a burial shroud. Those who encountered her were marked, plagued by grief that was not their own. Some vanished altogether. The second night I stayed in Hallowmere, I woke to the sound of crying. It was faint at first, drifting through the broken window of the abandoned house where I'd set up camp. The kind of sound that makes the hair on your arms rise before your mind has even registered it. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The night air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine. The sobbing grew clearer. It came from the bridge. I walked slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, to leave the village and never return. That's a maple morbid fascination. Maybe something stronger drew me on. My beam cut across the stones of the bridge and froze. She was there. A woman in a pale, tattered gown stood at the center of the bridge, her Baktuma. Her long dark hair clung weightily to her shoulders. Her body shook with each sob, her hands clutching the edge of the stone rail as though to keep herself from collapsing. "Are you? All right." My voice trembled, even as I spoke. The sobbing stopped. She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to glimpse her face. It was pale, to pale, with eyes black and hollow as open graves. Her mouth moved, but the words that came out weren't words at all. They were a sound, a low wail that pierced directly into my bones. The flashlight flickered. The air turned cold, my breath clouding before me. I stumbled backward, but when I looked up again, she was gone. I left the bridge shaken, but worse than the fear was the heaviness that settled over me afterward. In the hours and days that followed, it never lifted. I felt her sorrow like a stone in my chest, dragging every thought, every step downward. I began to see her in the edges of things. A reflection in the creek, a shadow in a window, the outline of her dress between the trees. Always watching, always weeping. The villagers, what few remained scattered in nearby towns, said this was her giftor, her curse. To see her was to carry a fragment of her grief, to join her in mourning for something you had never lost. Some said that was why the village withered. No one could live long under the weight of sorrow that wasn't theirs. By the fourth night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the sobbing, closer than before. Sometimes it sounded like it was right outside my door. On the fifth night, I made the mistake of following the sound again. The crying led me not to the bridge, but to the churchyard at the edge of the village. The moon hung low, shrouded in cloud, the headstones jutting up like crooked teeth. She stood among them, bent over a grave that bore no name, only a date half worn away. I should have turned back, but I couldn't. "Eliza," I whispered, though I didn't know how I knew her name. She lifted her head. Tears streaked her face, but her eyes empty, black, infinite locked onto mine, and for a moment I felt everything. The crushing despair of waiting for someone who never returned, the betrayal of a village that had turned its back, the endless weight of grief with no release. My knees buckled. I fell to the ground, choking on sobs that weren't mine. When I looked up, she was kneeling before me. Her hand cold, damp, and possibly heavy touched my cheek. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The message was clear. Stay. Mourn with me. Forever. Somehow, with strength I didn't know I had, I wrenched free and stumbled blindly through the headstones, through the mist, back to my truck. I don't remember turning the key. I don't remember the road out. I only remember the sound of her sobbing, following me until the village disappeared in the rearview mirror. That was months ago. I never went back to Hallowmere, but leaving the village didn't mean leaving her. The crying still follows me. Sometimes I wake in the night certain I hear her just outside the window, weeping softly. Sometimes, driving dark roads, I catch a glimpse of her in the headlights, standing at the side of the road, gown wet, hair plastered to her face. The weeping maiden of Hallowmere isn't bound by that village. She lingers wherever sorrow can take root. And once you've heard her, once you've carried her grief, you never put it down again. I know one day I'll hear her call too clearly to resist. One day, I'll follow the sobbing back to the bridge, or the churchyard, or wherever she waits. And when that happens, I won't come back. Because the maiden doesn't just weep for the past. She weeps for the living. She weeps for the one she is still waiting to claim. And I think she's waiting for me.